What's up, my friend? Welcome back to another video. And today, I just wanted to share a little concept with you that I don't think is taught enough or at all in orchestration textbooks, okay? And this is one that I think is super important and one that we should actually be taking advantage of. And if you don't do this, especially in today's environment, it's going to be really difficult to create realistic sounding mockups with your sample libraries. So what is this one piece of advice, you ask? In my opinion, orchestration textbooks never tell you to learn from your sample libraries. Okay, so what I mean by that is most orchestration textbooks will go through and teach you in depth about every single instrument, maybe in ensembles, doubling contexts, how to write idiomatically for them, and so on and so forth. But a lot of these textbooks were written in decades past, right? Or even if they're more recent, they really don't take as much technology into account as we have nowadays, so in a lot of ways, technology is such a blessing, and it could also be seen as a curse with AI and stuff, right? And it's scary for sure, but when it comes to sample libraries and the technology we have available to us nowadays, there really is an overwhelming amount of choice. And I've always said in so many videos that less is more. Like, you don't need every single library on the market to write great music. In fact, I think that's actually overwhelming. And this is something I've been mentioning to my community, Chris's composing community, all the time. When people are asking which sample library should I use, or I'm feeling overwhelmed with everything I have, I always tell them that less is more, and really just settle on the instruments you really enjoy using all the time and make those your core tools for most of your music, at least 90%. So if you were to ask me, Chris, what are your favorite libraries for each section? I could narrow it down, very easily. For strings, CSS. For woodwinds, CSW. For brass, Cinebrass. For percussion, Cineperc. And then there's others like harps, pianos, and so on and so forth, which I also have dedicated libraries for. But the beauty about these tools is that you can learn so much from your sample libraries by simply noodling around on your instrument. One thing you can learn is the range of the instrument, okay? Now, the more instruments you do have, like the more libraries you do have in that certain section, like let's say for strings, the more consistency you'll find across those different patches in terms of the ranges, right? For example, some developers will sample the low G on the violin all the way up to, let's say, a high C, like C6, but some developers will go even higher than that. So based on that, you can say that, okay, the first developer sampled the high notes a little bit more conservatively, whereas the second developer really aimed for the higher notes, but it just shows that the violin has such a wide range. So the actual playable range of notes is a huge thing that you can learn simply by using your sample libraries. All right. Now, of course, they can artificially extend the range lower or higher as well if they want to, but most sample library developers won't do this unless they want to give you that ultimate flexibility. But it really is in most cases, it's focusing on the natural range of the instrument from the lowest to the highest. Okay. So range is a big thing that you could certainly find out in textbooks as well, but it's a lot easier, more practical if you can feel that under your fingers. Another thing you can find out is the actual sound of the instrument. And that's one thing orchestration textbooks can't give you through text, is how it actually sounds. So they'll recommend, like, listen to pieces, listen to tracks that you like, get that sound in your head, which is totally valid. And I always recommend listening to your favorite scores to learn your instruments as well. But the great thing about sample libraries, especially if those instruments are individually sampled, is that you can literally go down to the nitty-gritty and hear how each individual instrument sounds, the different dynamics they have, the different timbres they're able to accomplish, right? All of that stuff you learn from your sample libraries, and it's all under your control as well. So the downside of listening to live recordings and pre-recorded pieces of music is that those instruments are playing according to the directions that the composer and arranger gave that player, right? So they might not be covering all the different facets of that instrument and all the different articulations. They might only need to play legato for a certain line, a certain passage. But with a sample library, if it's deeply sampled, then you have multiple articulations you can play with and lots of different dynamics you can go through depending on how many they've sampled. But usually 3 is a good place to start, like soft, medium, and loud, right? So I think that's the biggest benefit of using sample libraries. And for me personally, I learned a lot from playing with my sample libraries. One particular example I'm thinking of is CSS, of course, because now I know how passionately strings can play and how smooth legato can actually be in sample libraries and therefore in real life as well, because those are recorded transitions, right? The other library I'm thinking of that really gave me an appreciation for the woodwinds especially was Berlin Woodwind Soloist 1 and 2. So the Soloist 1 library has the core like flute, oboe, English horn, whatever, and Soloist 2 has some other ones. But that was the first library where I really played through those instruments and I fell in love with the woodwind section. Because they sampled them so well, and it just had that creamy sound as such a smooth legato that really was meant for exposed passages. And I've used those libraries countless times in so many tracks, and they've served me so well over the years. And so sample libraries can also give you just a better and deeper appreciation for certain instruments, certain sections, depending on how they're scripted and programmed. Sample libraries can be so versatile in that regard. And so I think the biggest advantage that sample libraries have, honestly, it's just the ability to hear what you want to hear, and having that control over those instruments under your fingers is literally a no-brainer compared to reading a textbook. Because now and nowadays, I feel like more people are heading over to video, right? And there are certainly people who still love to read, but I think listening is one of your most powerful tools when it comes to becoming a better composer and a better orchestrator at the same time, and sample libraries are the best way to do that, especially if the GUIs in the sample libraries are inspiring to play with. Maybe they're simpler, there's not too much to tweak, so you can really just focus on the natural sound of the instrument and play again with the different articulations, hear how they sound, fiddle around with the modulation, right, with your mod wheel, pitch bend if you want to as well, and then maybe go and listen to live recordings of those instruments and see how they sound in reality. So now you have a sense of how they sound in your sample library versus how they sound in reality and how close they actually are compared to one another. So yeah, that's basically it. Most orchestration textbooks will focus on the instrument details themselves, but they have to use a lot of words to explain those concepts to you because it's a book most of the time. And some of them nowadays have CDs and websites with audio files that you can listen to, which are wonderful. But I think the best way to literally learn your instruments is using your sample libraries and take advantage of the technology and the tools you already have. So pull out patches without the goal of literally necessarily having to write music, but bring in the patch with the goal of learning that instrument in that patch. So go through the different articulations, play the different notes. If it's legato, make sure those notes are overlapping and hear those legato transitions. Fiddle with the modulation, hear how the dynamics sound from bottom to top, right? Brass will naturally be a bit more varied in terms of the timbral dynamics versus something like the strings, right? So you learn that through playing with your sample libraries and taking your time to get to know them as best as you can. And in my opinion, that's the best way to really learn from your sample libraries. And again, that's something that's underappreciated that not many people talk about, but you don't really need many sample libraries to do this. Even if you just have that one core library per section, you can do this. And that's basically how I've worked as well over the years. Now, that's not to discount the power of critical listening and again, listening to your favorite tunes and scores, because you need to have a reference of what you're aiming for in terms of realism and convincingness, right, of your mockup compared to the real thing. So of course you should listen to live recordings and your favorite scores, but don't underestimate the power of playing with your sample libraries and learning your tools in and out. But the most important thing is the sound. Get to know the sound of the instrument, and just, yeah, you might come to appreciate it even more. And you might develop some personal favorite instruments as a result of doing this. So there we go. Hopefully that kind of makes sense. And if you are wondering about sample libraries, the core libraries that I use, as well as some other recommendations I might have, then I want to give you my sample library buyer's guide absolutely free. You can grab it, the first link in the box below. And it's a very, not a short PDF, but I would say it's more comprehensive, and it tells you the different libraries that I would personally recommend. I've also included like the utilities and how I would use them, as well as the pricing. So if you're curious about my thoughts on a certain library and you're wondering if I've covered it or talk about it at all in the guide, then you can refer to it and use it as a reference the next time you're out to buy a new sample library, or again, just to read my thoughts on it. So there you go. Hopefully that makes sense. Let me know what your thoughts about this. Do you use your sample libraries to learn from to learn about the orchestra, or do you just use them to do your mock-ups and that's it? I'd love to hear your approach to that. But that's it. I'll catch you in the next video. Thank you so much, and I'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.